So, to Darkness into Light, this is our flagship fundraising event. I'm sure you may, if you're here today, you probably do know what it is. And it's occurred every May since 2009. It isn't just a fundraising event. Just as importantly, it looks to drive conversations around the issue of suicide. And it also represents community hope and solidarity. From 2009 to 2014, Darkness into Light had grown to provide a third of the annual income of Pieta House. In effect, Darkness into Light allowed us to keep our doors open and our services free for 4 months. The rest of the year we have to find in other ways. Growth of the event, while it was good, it allowed us to grow the participant numbers from 400 in 2009 to 65,000 in 2014. So huge impact in that. The event in 2014 was in every province in Ireland, and we had an income of 1.8 million in 2014. However, the growth had overtaken the ability to fully realise the fundraising potential and to generate as much activity, both in terms of discussing and generating the conversation and in generating and raising funds as well. So to talk about the strategy adopted in terms of maximising the impact of Darkness into Light, I started in January 2015, so what I've spoken about predates me. And one of the first things I did was a full systematic review of the entire organisation. And interestingly, when I arrived in Pieta House, we didn't even have a fundraising department. We didn't have an advocacy department. We kind of had a department of money that looked after money in and money out. But we had some incredibly dedicated people and incredibly skillful people. So establishing the department was the first thing that we did. Looking directly at Darkness into Light, it was evident that the event as it currently was structured was completely at full stretch. All we had done was taken one event in the Phoenix Park in 2009, and we had replicated it warts and all across a number of different centres throughout the country. So it was important that we had to have a complete strategic rethink of the structures that delivered Darkness into Light. We needed to completely strip it apart and then rebuild it in a way that would be future safe. We also needed to rebuild it in a way that took it from being a 5K sponsored walk in Ireland to becoming an actual global movement against suicide. And there is a massive difference between facilitating a movement where people engage and own the issues of suicide and engage and own the solutions to suicide than just running a sponsored walk. So that was a huge challenge for us. We needed to educate and build the personal resilience of individuals and communities to prevent suicide and to generate further income, not just in Ireland but across the globe. So with the global vision in mind, we secured international trademarks for the event. And in 2015, we opened the first venues outside of the British Isles. We had a venue in London in 2014, but in 2015, we had walks both in the north and south of Ireland, across the UK, the United States, Canada, and Australia. And we grew the numbers to 70,000 people with an income of 2.4 million. So from 65,000 to 70,000, from 1.8 million to 2.4 million, so modest growth. The marketing and delivery of Darkness into Light needed, of course, to be completely restructured to engage much greater numbers of people in the movement and consequently in the event. So since inception, we had never ever communicated with participants in the event. The most they got was their ticket after they registered and a thank you. And in fact, 3/4 of our participants registered offline in paper forms. So the whole GDPR thing has been a nightmare for us for the last year, but we are on top of it, fingers crossed. But we had never communicated. So if you want a movement to engage and build the resilience of people, to equip them to become, I suppose in one sense, suicide proof, you have to engage, you have to communicate, and you have to allow a dialogue within that. So part of that was about encouraging them, sharing with them what the problems were, sharing with them what the solutions were, and asking them to engage fully in that process. In essence, what we wanted to do was hand the entire organisation over and say, you own it. It is yours. Under charity law, that is the case. There isn't a penny that Pieta House holds that doesn't belong to the public. But to say that to people and say, this is your organisation, this is your solution, but then to turn that round, it's almost like giving a hug and saying thank you for supporting Darkness into Light. But we realised we had to also give them a clip round the ear and say, you contribute to the problems. It is because of you that we exist to provide the solution. But it is because of your attitudes and either your direct actions or inaction that contribute to suicidal ideation in other people or indeed yourself. So that's a big challenge to give that message. So looking at the what we did to kind of maximize the campaign, we engaged a specialist consultancy in peer-to-peer fundraising. And very briefly, peer-to-peer fundraising, if you think of fundraising when you were a kid, you were given a sponsorship card, and the amount of money you raised was directly attributable to how far you were prepared to walk or allowed to walk. So you went round your family, and you got them to sign the card, then you went round the street, and you got them to sign the card, and then you maybe went to your scout den or your football club, and you got them to sign the card. We all remember that. Peer-to-peer fundraising uses exactly the same principle, because the basic principle of that is people believe in other people, and people support other people. You don't necessarily just take a cause. It's about who is engaged to that. So if you looked at my funding history, I fund more karate clubs than I do charities, but mainly because of my nieces and nephews. Because they say, we're doing a sponsored walk for, will you sponsor? And I say, you're my nephew or niece, yes, I'll support you and I'll support that. So we needed to use that. So peer-to-peer marketing takes the same principle, but it puts it into a digital space. So rather than me being able to access you and funds within touching distance, I now use my network. So I can extend way beyond the borders of Ireland, and I can engage way beyond the people I know. Because you know that in Facebook, if you put up the post and say, I sponsored Brian Higgins for Darkness into Light, then somebody who is unknown to me may say, actually suicide prevention, I believe in that, I'm going to do the same thing. And that's our deliberate intent. The process of changing Darkness into Light to a movement has involved creating mechanisms where non-participants can also engage in the process. So Darkness into Light up until 2014, you had to be there to be part of it. After 2014, you can sleep in, you can be a part of it, you can engage in the process by communicating with us. You don't have to do Darkness into Light, but we can equip you with the skills and the tools necessary to enhance your own life and your own resilience. So key tools were online fundraising, online registration, regular communication by email and social share graphics, and more compelling messaging to build advocacy and support. Much greater use of social media. The role I had before Pieta House, I was a director of missing people in the UK. We worked directly in combating child abduction and missing persons. And each year we do a big tweet on International Missing Children's Day. So every hour we take an actual case of an actual missing child and we tweet it. And I know that my last year we found 4 children through the campaigns during the day. But a large part of that is using social media and using influencers. So we were able to get the Prime Minister, Richard Branson was one of our patrons, Stephen Fry was one of our patrons, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the internet, was one of our patrons. So we had a good people to rely on. We also had Simon Cowell and all of the X Factor and Britain's Got Talent. So it was about using networks to share those messages. So when there is a good idea, you steal a good idea and you bring it across. So one of the first things we did was we looked at our social media accounts and saw who follows Pieta House and who is working in mental health, who engages in these. So we reached out and made friends with the Rubber Bandits, Brezzy, GAA Stars. We also had Jeremy Irons, who does it every year in Cork. Sonia O'Sullivan, who does it every year in Sydney. Enda, who did it in Toronto for us last year. And so using these influencers, we also realized that using our friends' social media accounts, you can access more people as well. So you're looking at the wrong thing. You need to look up here. Okay? Yeah. So it's that William Shatner. And that's where you get that influence and where you can get people to really engage people with this.